I'm Clever Ghoul, but you can call me Nikki. Welcome back to the channel. I know to some people it may seem early, but I think it's time for some holiday content on the channel. I know in the past I've done more of a kitschy Christmas, but this year I really want to lean into a darker sort of Christmas, a little bit of Yule, a little moodier, extending some of spooky season into this festive season. Essentially a hauntmas, a creepmas, and I wanted to start off with some decor that you can easily make. You've probably seen a lot of bows in store, like these tree bows from West Elm, or this bow garland from Anthropology. So this week, to kick off holiday crafting, we are making a bat bow garland, taking those holiday bows and adding a little bit of spook to them. So with that being said, let's get into it. For materials, you'll need the following: 2 sizes of velvet ribbon. I used 1.5 inch and 7/8 of an inch. I recommend having 2 full rolls of each, but you may need more depending on how many bows you wish to make. Also, I got mine on sale at Joann recently, but I'm going to link comparable items in the description box below. Fabric scissors, zip ties, chipboard or scrap cardboard, an X-Acto knife, regular scissors, a pencil and a metal ruler, a Sharpie, wire cutters. Optionally, you may need a lighter, and some yarn, string, or twine. As always, I have these materials linked in the description box below, and I do earn a small commission, so thank you. To start, we're going to make a template using chipboard or scrap cardboard. First, determine the size and length that you want your bow to be. For my 1.5 inch ribbon, I wanted my length to be 8.5 inches. So the template strip I'm about to make is going to be 1.5 inches thick by 8.5 inches long. To make this, I put my ruler at the edge of the chipboard and marked out where 1.5 inches was. I then repeated this step across the length of the chipboard, making little dashes. Next, I used my ruler to connect all those dashes and have a clear line so I knew where to cut my template. Then, I carefully lined up my ruler and cut with an X-Acto knife. I repeated the same process with the smaller ribbon, this time making my strip 7/8 of an inch thick by 7 inches long. To make the batwing arches, I penciled in a shape that I wanted on one side of the template, cut it out with scissors, folded the strip in half, traced the wing shape on the opposite side, and then cut it out. Then I repeated the same steps for the smaller strip before moving on. Place the template against the corresponding ribbon and cut with fabric scissors to get a perfectly sized piece. Then with a Sharpie, trace the batwing shape onto the ribbon. If you have trouble holding down your template here, I would suggest using a little piece of tape to hold everything down onto the table so that you trace accurately. Next, carefully cut out those batwing arches with your fabric scissors, and repeat this process as many times as you need for both sizes of ribbon. I ended up using 4 strips for each size. Now it's time to make the bow look like a bow, so pull out your zip ties. I would pre-thread a zip tie just slightly, getting a little loop going, and then put it off to the side before moving on. Then I would find the middle of those batwing ribbons, pinch it with my fingers, and while keeping it pinched, pick up the zip tie, thread the ribbon through it, start to slowly close the zip tie over that middle pinched section, and then remove my fingers and tighten the zip tie fully, wiggling if you need to adjust it at all for any reason, and finally taking your wire snips and snipping off the excess. Again, you repeat this process with all of your batwing bow pieces. As I was looking at the ribbon, I noticed that the edges were starting to fray, and I don't really want that look for my final piece, so I knew I would have to seal the ribbon. To do this, pull out a lighter and very carefully bring the flame near the ribbon, not touching the material, but close enough where the heat starts to melt the edges of the fibers. I recommend practicing this maybe over a kitchen sink with a scrap piece of ribbon so that you can get the hang of it before doing it on your actual bows. Before adding the tails of the bows, I wanted to measure out my yarn that I would be attaching them to. I did this off camera and I chose a red yarn because it's what I had on hand, but if I were to do this over in the future, I think I would use twine instead. It's time to cut out the bow tails. First, I cut out the tails for each ribbon size. Starting with the thicker ribbon, I made my tails 12 3/4 inches long. I would have gone for 16, but I only had 1 spool of this larger ribbon and I was starting to run out, which is why I do suggest getting more than 1 when doing this project. I moved on to cutting out tails for the smaller ribbon, this time going for 16 inches. I did this intentionally because I wanted a little variety between the bows and didn't want them to be super even when they sat, but if you want to do that, you should make the tails the same length, or trim them once you're done attaching them to the garland so they're even everywhere. To attach the bows, I would place the front of the bow, the velvet side down onto the table, place the ribbon tail around it, again with the velvet side against the table, and I would line it up so the center of the bow was in the middle of that ribbon tail piece. Then I would take that ribbon tail, tie it over the bow and yarn in a knot, attaching everything to the yarn. Then I would flip it over, adjust the tails, making sure that the velvet sides were facing forward, and then I would repeat the process with the remaining bows, making sure to attach them in the pattern so it would be big bow, little bow, big bow on both sides. But also you can do whatever pattern you want here. Once everything was attached, I moved them around to get them just where I wanted them, and then realized that I hadn't sealed off the edges of those ribbon tails, so I very quickly took a lighter and did that. Then it was all ready to hang up, which means it's time for the reveal. Here it is. Like I said earlier, I wanted to marry the idea of these simple bows with the fun, creepy batwing shape in a way that was a little more subtle and something where you might not catch it at first glance, and I think that I achieved that. This is an easy project that only took me about 2 hours to complete, but if you're making bows for a longer garland, it's obviously going to take you more time than that. But even with that, it isn't difficult, and I think it's a craft that anyone can do. Well, I think it's a craft that any adult should do. I don't think this is one you should do with kids, considering all the sharp tools and the fire element of it all, so be careful with that. And I know I did this garland for my mantle, but I think you can make a longer one for doorways, for your tree, and you could even use this method of making the bows for present wrapping if you wanted to. It's a pretty customizable craft, and I would love to hear how you're going to approach it at home. What color you'd use, if you'll use 2 different types of ribbons or just one, if you'd make a garland or do something else with it. So let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!